So first of all, let our learning be in memory of all of the fallen, with prayers for the good health of everyone who needs refuat hanefesh, refuat haguf, for the success of our soldiers and our leaders, for the return of our last hostage. Let us get started. So there are two things I want to do from last time. So I'm going to skip my introductory slide for a moment, and we're just going to spend 2 minutes on the things that we did not get to last time. So last time we talked about the Knesset and Knesset members and the government. And one of the people we did not get to is Golda. Golda is a very important, somewhat divisive figure, much more respected in Chutz La'aretz outside of Israel than in Israel, unfortunately, and that's mostly because of the end of her career, which was very sad because she was prime minister during the Yom Kippur War, and a lot of the failures of the Yom Kippur War were blamed on her, not necessarily justly. She was really an incredible person. She was, of course, the first and so far only female prime minister, but she did so many other things. She was very instrumental in fundraising during the War of Independence. Without her, we would not have had the money to buy arms. She was the labor minister, she was the foreign minister, she was the ambassador to Moscow, and she made a huge connection to the Soviet Jews who were there. Um, and finally, she was the prime minister. And she also, sorry, let's just see what this is. Um, and she also had, like a lot of these guys, a very sharp and quick wit. I'll just tell you a few things that she said. I'm sure other people know more. My favorite one is, "Don't be so humble, you're not so great." That's definitely, I think, one of the best ones. Um, then on a more serious note, right, she said, if we have to choose between being dead and pitied and alive with a bad image, we'd rather be alive with a bad image, which of course is something that resonates very much today as well. So, we could go on and tell more Golda stories, but we are going to continue because we have many things we need to get to today. And so the other personality, but less a personality and more the story around this personality, is the Lavon affair, Pinchas Lavon. Pinchas Lavon was the Minister of Defense. This was in the mid 50s, summer of 1954. There is a terrorist attack in Egypt, but it's actually an Israeli false flag operation. Israel plants the idea is to plant bombs in Egypt in order at British and Israeli and American targets in order to get the British to stay in the Suez. Okay? This is before the Suez operation in 1956. The operation has compromised. The Israeli who's in charge is actually a double agent. 11 people, 11 Israelis are arrested. 2 of them commit suicide. 2 are executed. 2 are acquitted, and 5 are sent to prison. Lavon, who's this fellow over here in the middle, the Minister of Defense, denies knowing anything. Okay, he blames it on Shimon Peres. The Prime Minister at the time, Moshe Sharet, sides with Peres. Lavon resigns. Meanwhile, Israel. This is in the days when the news media is very heavily controlled, and there's no such thing as social media, and everything is heavily, heavily censored, and nobody really knows anything. It's called ha'esek habish, the bad business. Okay? In 1960, okay, 6 years later, the case is reopened. There's evidence of perjury. A committee exonerates Lavon, but Ben Gurion, who meanwhile has become prime minister again, he resigns because he will not allow the committee to exonerate. He says only a court can exonerate, and he doubles down on this and he refuses to backtrack, with the idea being that nobody should be above the law. Meanwhile, the editor of this news magazine called Ha'olam Hazeh, somebody named Uri Avneri, manages to get around the censorship. And he starts to name names, and he does it all in this very clever way, and the news gets out there. Now, what happens? Why is this so important? Why is this not a forgotten story? It's actually a story that really dominates the headlines for a very long time in the 50s and 60s. Basically, what it does is it causes a split in the Mapai. Ben Gurion's colleagues turn against him. They feel that he's being obdurate and he's just messing everybody up. In a way, it's sort of a minor version of Watergate for Israel. People are more willing to criticize the government and the army, and journalism becomes the power of journalism, the power of the free press becomes much stronger. So that's just to finish up our stories. And if we go from the Knesset of 49 or 50, which sees Ben Gurion and the Mapai in incredible power, we finish up with the Esekabish, and there are some cracks in the facade. And this is really the beginning. It's going to take a long time until 1977 for Menachem Begin to be elected, but it's kind of the beginning of a less unified politics and more diversity. Okay, let's go back. So today, after we've gone through security and economy and the Knesset, and what else did we do? Oh, Aliyah, immigration. Okay, today we're really talking about something that gets to the very heart of all of the things that we're doing today, and that is the question of what is going to be the character of the Jewish state. Okay, this is a very new reality, a reality that is new, hasn't happened in 2,000 years for Judaism, that we have a Jewish state. How do we adapt Judaism to suit the needs of a state? Do we adapt Judaism? These are questions that we've had from the beginnings of Zionism, certainly with things like the Shemitah controversy, but they become much stronger when the state is already created. You need state institutions, army, healthcare. You need those things to function without non-Jews running them. Okay? We want to understand the character of our state. How do we commemorate things? How do we celebrate things? We have so many traditions coming in from so many different diasporas. Which one do we follow? Do we have a unified way of praying, or do we have diversity? Okay? And we also have the very big question of how to rebuild Judaism, certainly European Judaism, yeshiva Judaism, Chassidut, after the Holocaust, right? What we call She'erit HaPleita, the remnant, what's going to happen to them. All of these big questions are going to be discussed in the first 10 years of the state, and some of them are still being discussed now. So our themes today are how Jewish should the state of Israel be, and how normal, and I say normal in quotation marks, I mean normal being like everybody else, right? Kechol hagoyim. How do we create religious national institutions? What is the religious or biblical basis for the state of Israel? We're also going to talk about holy places. Remember, there is no old city, right? You can't go to the Kotel, you can't go to Har HaBayit, you can't go to Har HaZeitim. What become the holy places? As well as some major conflicts like army, like Shabbat, right? As well as some places and personalities. Well, that's a lot of things. Are we going to get to all of them? We'll try. Okay. Um, so just to kind of set out the conflict from the beginning, are we a nation like all others? And like everything in Zionism and in Judaism in general, there are differences of opinion. Theodor Herzl's vision is to solve the Jewish problem, right? What used to be called the Jewish problem. Save the Jews, not necessarily save Judaism. Herzl understood that the Jews in Europe were in crisis, that they could not survive there, and he wants to get them to a safe place. Does he worry that the place is going to be particularly Jewish, have a Jewish character? Necessarily. Okay? Already when he writes The Jewish State, okay, in 1896, he says, the Jews who wish for a state shall have it. We shall live at last as a free people on our own soil and die peacefully in our homes. The world will be liberated by our freedom, enriched by our wealth, magnified by our greatness. And whatever we attempt there to accomplish for our own welfare, will we act powerfully and beneficially for the good of humanity. Okay, that's all very nice. Is it something necessarily Jewish? Not necessarily. Okay. A few years later, when he writes a novel called Alt Neuland, which is kind of this futuristic envisioning what is the state of Israel going, he doesn't know it's called the state of Israel. What is the Jewish state going to look like? Um, it's not particularly Jewish. Okay, it's very European in its culture. Yes, people go to the Western Wall and they go to synagogue, but the language is whatever language will be the easiest, German perhaps, or French. The culture is a European culture. The buildings, the architecture, everything, right? It's not particularly Jewish. In contrast to Herzl, we have the very interesting character of somebody named Asher Ginsburg, who went by the pen name of Ahad Ha'am. And he talks about not saving Jews, but rehabilitating Judaism, right? That Israel, that the Jewish state should not be the place that all the Jews have to come to, but rather it should be the center and radiate out to a Jewish diaspora, which is still going to exist. And it should be the place of creativity, spirituality, right? Changing Judaism for the better. And he writes an essay. Everybody writes an essay, right? The Jewish state and the Jewish problem around the same time. A year later, that Herzl, from when Herzl wrote The Jewish State, and notice how he just takes part of the title, right? It is not only the Jews who have come out of the ghetto, Judaism has come out too. Judaism has come out or is coming out of its own accord whenever it has come into contact with modern culture. The spirit of our people desires further development. It wants to absorb the basic elements of general culture which are reaching it from the outside world, to digest them and make them a part of itself as it has done before at various periods of its history. We have to come to terms with modernity. We have to come to terms with the Enlightenment. What is our Judaism going to look like? Okay, and then he goes on and he discusses how this is going to develop in the center, right, in Israel. Then from the center, the spirit of Judaism will radiate to the great circumference, to all the communities of the diaspora, to inspire them with new life. So these are two very different visions of what the Jewish state should look like. And those visions, by the way, still exist today, right? Are we a sun that illuminates the diaspora, but the diaspora still exists? Or are we this place that is a refuge for Jews from all over the world? Somebody who is dealing with this on a very religious level, okay, is Rav Avram Yitzchak Cohen Cook, okay, where he wants a center that will have a revival of the religion that we had when we were living on the land. Okay? That we're not going to continue with the same galut way of thinking, with the same galut religion. We want to have a full national life. And he talks about, he sees the people of the second Aliyah, they are so creative. They want to make the world a better place. He sees socialism and he sees egalitarianism, and he wants that renewal in halachic Judaism. Right, and we just have a few quotes here, such powerful quotes. I walk around with an overwhelming jealousy of the secular world. It is a jealousy that consumes me. For is it really possible that the power of creativity has ceased within the religious world? There is no one who is willing to explain, expand, and help the world appreciate these holy ideas, nor is there anyone who is striving to help actualize them into practical deeds. Okay, that's one quote. Another one, he in his very famous essay called Hador, the generation. The hearts of the father will begin to see the treasures of good and hidden specialness in the sons, in the depths of their living and awoken souls. The sons will see the holiness and purity, the glory and grandeur that fill the hearts of the fathers, who have kept them as an inheritance for generations. It is only through the spiritual uniting of young Israel with old Israel that the redemption will come. So Rav Kook says we have to take both, right? We have to take these new ideas, these revolutionary ideas. We have to keep our halacha and our Torah and our traditions, and they have to come together. That's a beautiful idea. Does it work? There have been many who have tried. Okay? And just to give you one example of somebody who really wanted to renew Am Yisrael and Eretz Yisrael, but was brought up short by the problems, the practical problems of working the land during the Shemitah year, right? The Netziv from Naphtali Tzvi Yehuda Berlin, who withdraws his approval of heter mechira, of working the land during Shemitah if you sell it, because he says we must understand we are not here to settle the land of the Philistines, but to settle souls in a land holy to God and Israel, his people, right? We are not here just because we need a place to be. We are here because this is a holy land. and just give the last word. This is not a solution in any way, just to present the problem. The last word to Martin Buber, who says, if we want nothing to be nothing but normal, we shall soon cease to be at all. Right? So can the Jewish people ever be normal? Can the Jewish state ever be normal? What do you do? How do you create? And now we'll start answering these questions a little bit, not necessarily satisfactorily. Okay? How do we create a religious infrastructure in this state? Okay? Which has to include sovereignty. It has to include mamlachtiut, right? It has to include a state and statehood. Right? So first of all, we have a chief rabbinate. Right? This is something that existed already in British times. Okay? And in Israel, right, they are going to be the ones who are going to determine rules about Shabbat, about the education system, about marriage, about divorce, religious courts, etc., etc., etc. Okay? The first chief rabbis in the state of Israel, okay, the Ashkenazi chief rabbi, who already is from 1937, okay, in British times, and he is the Ashkenazi chief rabbi till 1959, is Rabbi Isaac Halevi Herzog. Okay? His son, Chaim Herzog, is ambassador to the United Nations. We'll talk about him in a minute. His grandson, Yitzchak Bugi Herzog, is the president today. Okay? This is a very strong dynasty. In some ways, he's very modern. Okay, he has a doctorate. He speaks English. He was the chief rabbi of Ireland. Look at his top hat. Right? Uh, he's a strong, strong Zionist. Right? On the other hand, he is against, he supports the Haredim in their desire not to be in the army. Right? Um, and he is a very, very halachic traditionalist. Right? What does he write? He gets a doctorate. What does he write his doctorate on? He writes it on how to make the tchelet, the secret of making the blue dye for tzitzit. That's the picture you have over here. His solution is different than what we use today. Um, he comes to the land of Israel in 1937. He is elected to be the chief rabbi. He wins out over Rabbi Yaakov Harlap. He testifies before the Peel Commission. Um, and he very famously, when the British issue the white paper restricting Jewish immigration at a time when Nazism is on the rise, he very famously tears up the white paper, seeing it as illegitimate. His son, 40 years later, Chaim Herzog, is going to go to the United Nations and tear up. I mean, he's going to be, going back to what his father did, and he tears up the UN resolution that equates Zionism and racism. He is very involved in creating the infrastructure of the rabbinate. He buys the land on which the Heichal Shlomo, where the chief rabbinate headquarters are for decades, he buys that land. In 1946, he raises the money. 1952, the cornerstone is laid. Today, it's a museum. It's not the chief rabbinate offices anymore, but his office has been recreated there. And he really is one of the chief architects of creating this idea of the rabbinate. The Sephardi rabbis, we have two. Rav Ben Zion Meir Chai Uziel is the chief rabbi already in British times until he dies in 1953. He is succeeded by Rav Nisim, okay, Rav Yitzchak Nisim, who is chief rabbi from 1955 to 1972. Okay, Rav Uziel is a Yerushalmi. He has a long, long career before he becomes the Sephardic chief rabbi. He's a rabbi in Jaffa. He's a rabbi in Salonika. He goes to greet Allenby when the British accept the surrender from the Turks. He's involved in freeing Agunot. We're going to see that's a theme in 1948. Not only him, but also Rav Goren. But he's already very much at the end of his career when he becomes the chief rabbi under the state of Israel. Rav Nisim comes to Israel in 1925 from Baghdad. He tries very much to unite the different streams, to host different voices in his homes, to go to the kibbutzim and to speak to secular. And he famously, this is not our time period, but I included it because it was important. In 1964, Pope Paul VI comes to the land of Israel. Hey, this is a very, very significant moment, a pope acknowledging the state of Israel, but he refuses to come and meet with Jews in Western Jerusalem. Hey, and the president, Shazar, you can see the Pope here, you can see Shazar here. Shazar comes to meet with him in Megiddo. Right? Megiddo is a very important site for Christians. They see it as the place of Armageddon. And that's where they do the official meeting with the delegation from the state of Israel and delegation of the Pope. Rav Nisim is invited, of course, to come, and he refuses. Okay? He won't come. He says it's beneath the honor of Judaism and of Torah for me to go and to meet him outside of Jerusalem. If he wants to meet me, he should come to Jerusalem. And he gets a lot of pushback from the government, but people very, very much support him. And they say, you have like lifted us up in our eyes and shown, the Jewish pride. So that's something about Rav Yitzchak Nisim. They were less involved than Rav Herzog in creating the mechanisms of the rabbinate. However, Rav Uziel and Rav Herzog were both involved in something that is a very nice example of this combination of new ideas and traditional sources. And that's the Tefillah L'Shlom HaMedina, the prayer for the state. Okay? On the one hand, it's a very traditional idea, right? From the time of Yirmiyahu says, pray for the success of the government that you are living in. Jews have always prayed for the government that they are under. Okay? Even if it was the Tsar, keep him far away from us, right? But to pray for the success of the state of Israel, that's a new idea. The tefillah has many words that come from traditional texts, right? Avinu Shebashamayim, Hashkif Mima'on Kodshecha, but also very new ideas. Reshit Smichat Gulatenu, okay? The prayer for the state is mostly written by Rav Herzog with some input from Rav Uziel. It's then sent to Shai Agnon, and that's what you could see here. This is a letter from the archives, right, where you could see the return address is the office of the chief rabbi of the Holy Land, okay, and it says Tfilat HaMedina Kfi Shuat Kava Tukna Mar Agnon, right? Shai Agnon put in, he edited it a little bit, but he didn't write it. And it's a new idea. And the same thing is, how do we celebrate, or do we celebrate Yom Ha'atzmaut? Okay, already May of 1949, the War of Independence is just over. Do we commemorate this day? How do we commemorate this day? Do we have it as like a holiday, like a Yom Tov? Do we say Hallel? Is it a secular day? Can you do work? Right? All of these questions are being dealt with for the very first time by the chief rabbinate. Now, this is not a class that we're doing on this subject, so we're not going to go into it too deeply, but it is something to think about. And even more difficult than thinking about how to celebrate is how to commemorate and how to mourn. Hey, what do we do about Yom HaZikaron, remembering the fallen soldiers? What do we do about Yom HaShoah? Hey, this is a very big controversy. Hey, what do we create a new day, or do we subsume the tragedies of the Holocaust into the many, many, many tragedies of Jewish history? Okay, Tisha B'Av commemorates Churban HaBayit, Churban Bayit Sheni, and many other things. Can it also commemorate the Holocaust? And we have differences of opinion from great rabbis, not from secular people. Forget about secular people who also felt that there needed to be some kind of a commemoration. But we have here, and I brought you two examples here. The Chazon Ish, who we're going to talk about a little later, okay, says we can't make new days. Matters of halacha are decided in accordance with the Torah, it's a source here on the right, whose principles are set down in writing, whose interpretation is in the oral law. No prophet is entitled to introduce anything unless it has textual support in the Torah. Just as a diminishing of anything is a deviation from the Torah, likewise adding is a deviation from the Torah. The establishment of a fast for all future generations is a rabbinically ordained commandment. And that which we have today goes back to the time when there was still prophecy. How then can we presume as a generation that is better off remaining silent to even think of establishing matters for future generations? The very suggestion testifies to our denial of all our sins and shortcomings. So long as we are soiled with transgressions and iniquities, destitute and empty of Torah and bare of commandments, let us not approach things too great for us. Let us search our ways and repent. So Chazon Ish says, there's no way. We can't make a new day. It has to be subsumed into the days we already have. Meanwhile, the Slonim Revi, the Nitivot Shalom, says, how can we not make a new day? How can we not make a new day? This tragedy is so vast and so great. It has to be commemorated, right? And this is the source here on the left. Though we were unable to do anything to stop the way they were annihilated, our hearts are pained that even after the great cataclysm, no commemoration for them has been established for the future. Some form of eulogy and mourning in the manner established by the sages after the pogroms of 5408, when they adorned the 20th of Sivan as a day for fasting and reciting slichot. Despite the relatively small dimensions of that tragedy, why should the tragedy of the Holocaust be different from all those tragedies? They certainly deserve a fast day and keynote of their own. Okay? And in the more secular world, the idea of Yom HaShoah, how is it commemorated? Should we have things that are not particularly traditionally Jewish? Sirens, moments of silence, right? How does this work? So these are all questions that were very much open questions. We're going to move to a different thing, which is what do we believe? What is the state based on? Certainly in the first decade of the state, the belief and the understanding that Tanakh, that the Bible is our birthright, it is the source of the reason that we are here, is, I won't say universal, but pretty much universal. And when I say universal, I mean it is not necessarily something that only religious people say. David Ben-Gurion probably went to synagogue once in his life. At least we know that he went once in his life on that very first Yom Ha'atzmaut. But he has a vast knowledge of Tanakh. He is fascinated by Tanakh. He has books and books and books, as you can see here. And he sees Tanakh as the reason why we are here. He's not a believer in God, but he is a believer in the Bible and sees it as our deed to this land. Right? In 1958, right, there are two things that happen. There is a Chidon Tanakh for adults, right, a national Bible quiz, and there is also the beginning of every other week sessions, Bible study sessions in the Prime Minister's house, which continue in one way or another, either the Prime Minister or the President, up until today. Right, there were gaps here and there, and every other week he invites top scholars, Bible scholars, archaeologists, public figures, right? People like Yitzchak Ben Tzvi and Binyamin Mazar and Yigael Yadin and Yuda Elitzor. Some of them religious, some of them not, with people giving a lecture and then a discussion afterwards. At the very first one, Yuda Elitzor is the speaker, and Gurion says he wants to be a student, he wants to be a Talmid Shel Chachamim, and he says he is ready to stay and learn all night long until 6:30 in the morning when he has to go to work. Right? He invites the spectrum. Okay, a very different sort of a person than Ben Gurion, but someone who also focused very, very much on learning Tanakh and certainly on learning Torah. Parshat Shavua is the woman on the right here, Professor Nechama Leibowitz. Okay? Professor Nechama Leibowitz comes to Eretz Yisrael, has a doctorate, teaches in university, but also teaches anywhere that people want her to teach. She travels all over the country, okay? Takes taxis everywhere. And in 1942, okay, she starts training young teachers. There's not enough teachers, there's not enough educators. And she starts training young teachers to teach Tanakh. And they're very short sessions. She doesn't teach them for a very long time. She doesn't have a lot of time. And they say, well, what are we going to do? We don't know enough. We're not ready. And she says, don't worry. I'm going to send you every week a sheet of questions about Parshat HaShavua. And you answer those questions and mail them back to me. This is all mail, right? This is 1940s. They're mimeograph sheets. I'm going to mail them out to you. You mail them back to me. I'm going to grade them and correct them and mail them back. And that way you'll know if you're on the right path, if you're doing the right thing. Okay. And she does this all obviously for free, no pay, nothing. Okay. This becomes a phenomenon. Gilyonot Nechama. I am sure that I have people here in this group who have studied Gilyonot Nechama, who have sat at their Shabbos table with them. And she has these amazing letters that she receives from people, nurses. I have a break in the middle of my shift. I'm doing the Gilayon. I'm sorry that my writing is not so neat, right? Taxi drivers, high school kids, people writing her from all over and answering these questions, and she's correcting them with her red pen and saying, no, you're not being careful enough, right? And this phenomenon of we need to learn Parshat Shavua, and we're going to learn it with Professor Leibowitz. So really an unbelievable thing. Kind of a corollary to this belief that the Tanakh is our birthright is archaeology. Okay, archaeology becomes a national pastime in the 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s. We're here, we've returned, right? Our Tanakh is coming to life, it's coming out of the ground. Um, and we have so many examples, right? On the left here, you have Yigael Yadin, who very famously said he digs with a shovel in one hand and a Tanakh and a Bible in the other. When he dug in Chatzor, he had already seen in Megiddo that there were gates, six-chambered gates, and he read in Sefer Malachim that Shlomo HaMelech built Gezer, Megiddo, and Chatzor. He says if there's six-chambered gates in Megiddo, and he also read the report about Gezer, then there must be in Chatzor, and he draws them on the ground, right? Because Tanakh says it, it must be there, and indeed it was there. Okay? On the right here, you have a picture from Ramat Rachel, right? Very important archaeological site in Jerusalem. Um, Excavated by Yochanan Aharoni in the 1950s, and he comes to present his findings in the Prime Minister's study session. And he starts by talking about the fantastic, beautiful palace that he's discovered with these gorgeous columns that you see here, with traces of red paint. And he opens up Sefer Yirmiyahu and he reads about the palace that is built by King Jehoiakim, who is an evil king, and he says, "Hoi boneh beito belo tzedek ve'aliotav belo mishpat." He builds his house with injustice, and he puts red on his windowsills. He continues reading the parak. He says, "We found red paint, and this is Jehoiakim's palace. Today we have a different understanding, but it's bringing Tanakh alive." Right? So very much this idea that this is the reason that we're here, and this is our deed to this land. Now, as much as we see Tanakh coming out of the ground, we have a very basic problem before 1967, which is that where are our holy places? Okay, we have no access to the old city. We have no access to Har HaZeitim. We have no access to the synagogues of the Jewish quarter. Hey, I actually didn't even talk about the picture that I showed you in the beginning. I forgot. I just go back very quickly. This is a picture of the Italian synagogue in Jerusalem. In the 50s and 60s, Israel brought many abandoned, incredibly beautiful pieces of furniture from synagogues in Italy, okay, bimas, Aronot Kodesh, and two entire synagogues, one in the Israel Museum and one that is a functioning synagogue on Rehov Hillel, brought them to Israel, had them make Aliyah because their communities had left, had abandoned. And this shul on Rehov Hillel, up until 1967, was the oldest synagogue in Jerusalem because all the synagogues in the old city were off limits and you couldn't go there. So where are our holy places? We don't have holy places. So very interesting character. Okay? Somebody named Shmuel Zanvil Kahana. You could see him here in the hat holding the torch. Okay? He was the religious affairs minister, and he decided to deal with this problem. He says, we need holy places. So you have here this great map, Madrich Lemekomot HaKadoshim, the guide to the holy places that are under the supervision of the religious affairs ministry. Okay, we'll get to Jerusalem in a minute, but along the way, he says, okay, you have Tzfat, you have Meron, right? You have Tveria, you have Haifa, right? So what does he do? He takes some old sites and really publicizes them and builds them up. So, for example, Haifa. Why is Haifa a holy place? Because you have Eliyahu's cave, Ma'arat Eliyahu. He says this is a very important holy place, right? He focuses on graves, Miron, right? The grave of Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, or Tveria, Rabbi Meir Baal HaNes, okay? But it's not enough to have the old places. He also kind of creates, identifies new places. Okay, one of the most famous ones is you see here on the signpost. You have a sign that says, where's Jerusalem? Where's Tel Aviv? And you have, where is Sela HaChorban, the rock of the destruction? Near Beit Shemesh, massive boulder. Kahana sees this boulder and he connects it to a story that Ze'ev Vilnai, right, one of the real uh, scholars of Eretz Israel, writes this story, basically a legend, okay, about a guy who's coming very, very strong, like Shimshon. This is the area of Shimshon, Beit Shemesh. Okay, hears that they need stones to fortify the wall of Jerusalem when the Romans are attacking it, carries this massive stone as he's walking to Jerusalem. He sees in the distance that there are flames coming out of the temple and Jerusalem has been destroyed, and he's heartbroken. He drops the rock and he dies on the road. And this is called Sela HaChurban. Is this real? No. Okay, but Kahana makes it into something that is a very, becomes a place of pilgrimage. Okay, and not everybody likes this idea, both religious people and non-religious people, right? They say you're making stuff up. This is not okay. But other people say no, this is important. This is we need places to go, and he is developing them. Okay, the other picture here on the right is bringing the torch from the graves of the Maccabees to Jerusalem. This becomes a Hanukkah tradition. Okay, so he develops all these new traditions, but the place that he develops the most is Mount Zion. Okay, Mount Zion, Har Zion, is the only part sort of the old city that remains in Israeli hands before 1967. It's the only connection to the old city. It was under the control of a Muslim family called the Dajani family. They are kicked out, and Kahana says this is going to be the place that we are going to have all our important national rituals, right? So you have a shul here, you have memorials here, memorial to those who fell in the Jewish quarter. But more than that, right? He says, okay, on Yom Ha'atzmaut, we're going to light torches here. On Hanukkah, we're going to light the Chanukiot here. We're going to read Eicha here on Tisha B'Av. Okay? We are going to really focus on the one holy site that is here, Kever David. Okay? The grave of King David, whether it is, it isn't. He brings Torahs from the Holocaust, saved from the Holocaust, and he brings them to Kever David. He establishes a big holiday on the Yortzeit of David HaMelech, Zion Sivan, right, and makes this a huge place of pilgrimage, as well as above Kever David. You can still go up there today. On the rooftops, you have a view, Mitzpeh HaBayit. You have the view to Har HaBayit, one of the few places in Jerusalem, Western Jerusalem, that you can see the Temple Mount. Okay? And also Cheder HaNasi, a place that was set aside for the president of Israel. And the final thing he does, and perhaps the most significant thing that he does, is he creates the first Holocaust museum on Har Zion. Why? Well, first of all, the holiness of Har Zion. Second, King David, right? King David, symbol of redemption, of Geula, right? All these good things. And third, we have a pasuk in Ovadia that says, "Ubahar Zion tiyeh pleta." The remnant, those that are left behind, will be on Mount Zion. And what he does is he takes an old abandoned building, okay, and he says to the communities who are the people who have survived, who have come to Israel, come and make a memorial plaque for your community. Your community might be an enormous community like Lublin, right? You see here, or Vilna, or it might be a group of, prisoners of war who were together. He doesn't make any rules. Anybody wants to bring something, bring something. There are hundreds of these plaques that are put up. There is no formula. Everybody writes what they want to write. He says, do you want to come and bring something that's a memento, that's something that you saved, right? Whether it was a Torah scroll, whether it was a siddur that was written by hand, okay? All of these things. It is the antithesis of Yad Vashem, which is founded a few years later. It's not official. It's not governmental. It's not historical. It's a place for survivors to remember and to gather, and that's what he puts on Har Zion. Okay. Moving on to things that became big conflicts. Okay, the army. Okay, how do we have a Jewish character to the army, and we'll talk in a minute about kind of the corollary. How do we get everybody to go into the army? The most important person to create the Jewish character of Tzahal, of the IDF, is the gentleman on the left here, who you more used to seeing with a white beard and much more hair, but this is in his younger days, and that is, of course, Rabbi Shlomo Goren. Okay, Rabbi Shlomo Goren, Gornitsky, he changes his name. Okay, he's born in Poland. His family makes Aliyah. He is a very, very interesting combination of a brilliant scholar. Okay, he goes to the Chevron Yeshiva already when he's 12 years old. He's an Eloi. He writes his first book when he's 17. But he also sees the importance of Jewish self-defense. He's in the Haganah in 1936, okay? And then he's in Tzahal. And after the war, he's very involved in going behind enemy lines and bringing bodies to be buried in the new Har Herzl. Okay? These are people that were brought back from Gush Etzion, okay, and we reburied. And he believes very strongly, along with Ben Gurion, in the same principle, but for very different reasons. Both of them want one army. They do not want an army that is divided by religious units and non-religious units, socialist units, Palmach, one unified army. Now, Ben Gurion wants this because he feels that we should have one united, right? No right, no left, no nothing. Everybody should be the same. That same, probably secular, right? Rav Goren wants one army because he wants the whole army to have a Jewish character. And basically, Ben Gurion goes along with his idea, and Rav Goren creates the halachic parameters in the army, meaning that all army-based kitchens will be kosher, that Shabbat will be publicly observed in the army, that there'll be a synagogue on every single base. Right? He works to free agunot. Right? If any of us here have had children or grandchildren in the army, they will tell you you are never allowed to cook milchiks in an army kitchen. It sounds crazy, right? But it's true. Right? You can have cold things. You can have, pudding, but you can never make macaroni and cheese in an army kitchen. Why? Because that makes things much, much easier to trafe up. Right? And that's Rav Goren. So that's a very small thing, but he creates the situation, the parameters whereby you can have an army that can have halacha. Does it mean that everything is always halachic? No, but he creates that framework, and that's very, very, very important. However, that does not mean that ultra-Orthodox people want to draft. Okay? And already in 1948, Haredi leaders go to Ben Gurion and they say we want to push off our service. We want to be exempted from our service is really what they say. Ben Gurion says, I'm going to give you dichyat shirut. I'm going to push off your service. And for those people who Toratam umanutam, this is a more modern sign, but it's the same idea. Torato umanuto kmo pa'am. Your Torah is your livelihood, right? It's a phrase from the Gemara. But this is taken to mean if you are a full-time student, you can push off your service indefinitely. Okay? Now, why does Ben Gurion agree to this? Right? He agrees to it in 1949 because, first of all, we're talking about a very small number of people. Okay? The first group that he gives this delay to are 400 people. Okay? Not only that, okay, he does not want conflict in 1949. We have enough things on our plate, certainly in Jerusalem. He doesn't need more protests, more trouble. And also, and this is a very significant point, he's looking at the Torah world, okay, and the leaders who are coming to him are telling him about the Torah world, and they're saying, we have been devastated. Okay? The Hasidic dynasties, the Hasidic followers have been almost completely wiped out. The great yeshivot have been wiped out. We need to rebuild Torah. We are ud mutzami esh. We are a spark that has been saved from the fire. And so Ben Gurion agrees. However, 10 years later, 1958, he says enough. Enough is enough. There are many, many more people. Some of them are just draft dodging, right? They're not all honest, and we need them. And he goes and he has a whole correspondence with Rav Herzog. right? Rav Herzog, Zionist Rav Herzog, Chief Rabbi Rav Herzog, who says, no, no, no. You have to allow them to study. This is the refuge. This is the remnant. They need to study. And Ben Gurion writes him various letters, and I brought you a few quotes from them. And this is Ben Gurion. Okay, he says, Asher lebachurei yeshiva, davar nidmeli eino ko pashut. It's not so simple about the yeshiva boys. Keshepatarti lifnei 10 shanim bachurei yeshiva mishirut batzava, hayam misparam mu'at. There were very few of them 10 years ago. V'gam kfi shene'emar li az, hayta zo ha'aretz hayichida sheba nisharu lomdei Torah lishma. And I was told that this was the only country where you had people who were studying Torah lishma, only, all the time. Im ki alai letzayin b'simcha ki bachurei yeshiva lakhu chelek b'hagana Yerushalayim k'shar tzirei Yerushalayim. Even though I saw that there were yeshiva boys who protected Jerusalem. Hamatzav me'az hishtana. Bachurei yeshivot ravu. There are many, many more yeshiva students. And then he goes on and he says, we need them. Okay, and he says, Asur lishkoach, she'ein anu mamshichim po chayei hagalut. We are not continuing the life of the diaspora. V'tzluyim b'chesdei zarim, and we are not dependent on the mercies of outsiders, of goyim. V'namshich linhog ka'ama samuch l'shulchan acherim. We cannot continue to act as if we are sitting at someone else's table, is basically the idiom, that others are supporting us. Anu omdim b'rshut atzmeinu. We are independent. Bitachon mutal aleinu be'atzmeinu. We have to hold the yoke of defense. This is a great honor that we have been given after hundreds of years. And every young person in Israel has this responsibility. As anybody who follows the news knows, this is not a problem that has been solved since 1958. It is a problem that we are still dealing with very, very much today. One other thing that I will add, I brought this picture of Ben Gurion in the army, okay, with Yigal Alon. Ben Gurion also did not see the army only as something that we need your bodies, but he really saw the army as forging the character of the state, forging the character of the people, making a new Israeli. By the way, this is the reason that the Haredim are not interested in going into the army. Okay? But Ben Gurion sees this as something that is building the state, and a very famous phrase. He says, Am boneh tzava, boneh am. The people build an army, which builds a people. Okay? This is a melting pot. This is a way to create our character. And if you don't join, you are being left out of the Israeli character. Again, arguments that are ripped from the headlines. What about women? Okay, when it comes to women, even the religious Zionist community, which supports going into the army, did not, until recently, support women going into the army. In 1949, there is a law of mandatory army service, but girls are allowed to go and say that they are religious, and then they can be exempted. When this becomes kind of taken advantage of, and more girls, even if they aren't religious, try to get out of their service, in 1953, there is the Sherut Leumi law, the national service law, to which there is great opposition in the religious public. The Chazon Ish, Rav Charlap, they say this is Yehareg v'al yavor. We will die and not allow this to pass. Ultimately, the law passes, but nobody really enforces it. And that's really the situation today. There are girls who go in to do national service. There are Arabs. There are even the boys who go into national service, but nobody enforces it. The pictures are of a young woman doing national service in the Ma'abarot. And here on the right, in 1952, one of many pictures of protests, right? Protests against this national service law. And you can see religious women here, one woman who's being arrested, others who are trying to pull her away. And this is another breaking point, right, between the government and between the secular public and the religious public. Ultimately, by the end of the 50s, we have the beginning of what's called Hesder Yeshivot, not religious soldiers. There always were religious soldiers, but a hesder, right? An arrangement whereby you have yeshivot that incorporate army service and study. The very first one is Karen Biavne. That's the picture that you have over here. The Hesder Yeshiva take off much more 10 years later, especially when we have Yeshivat Har Etzion and Rav Amital and the many, many other Hesder yeshivas that are around. But that's a story for another time. Okay, a few more things that we're going to try to get done. Another huge conflict, Shabbat. Okay, we have Shabbat wars, what are called the Shabbat wars. Pretty much every decade has Shabbat wars, but the earliest ones start even before the state begins. And certainly once the state has been declared, we have a very big question. Shabbat, Saturday, is proclaimed as the national day of rest. Okay, Christians can have Sunday, Muslims can have Friday, but Shabbat is the day of rest. Everything, nothing officially, no official work. What does that mean? Is it a halachic day of rest? Is it a day where you can go to the beach? Is it a day where you have public transportation? Is it a day where stores are open? Is it a day where people go to synagogue? Every area, every reshut, right? Every municipality basically decides for itself. There are no official decisions that are made. And hence, particularly in Jerusalem, there are many, many protests. One of the focal points of the protests, particularly in the late 40s, early and throughout the 50s, is movie theaters. Okay, and particularly movie theaters in the summer. Okay, once we have daylight savings time and Shabbat ends very late, okay, movie theaters want to be able to, even if they're not going to show the movie till Shabbat is over, they want to sell tickets before. And they would open up the ticket office and there would be massive, extremely violent protests, okay? Police, ultra-Orthodox coming. We even have stories of people who would come and who would stick their heads into the ticket box so that nobody could buy tickets and everybody would just hit them and beat them up. Okay? One of the focal points of these protests was the Edison Cinema, which no longer exists. Today it's irony of ironies, a Haredi apartment building in Zichron Moshe. Okay? One of the suggestions for a compromise was to say, okay, well, why don't you have, start later. You could sell tickets on Friday, but open the theaters much later. And the movie theater owners say, we can't start later. This is Jerusalem. In Jerusalem, people go to sleep early. Nobody's going to come to the movies if it starts late, which is, people will still say that about Jerusalem today. One of the group that is most involved in the Shabbat wars, and it's not only about movies, it's also about transportation, right? Roads that go through Haredi neighborhoods, cars are stoned. And the group that is most prominent is a group called the Neturei Karta, the guardians of the city, which of course still exists today, extremely, extremely anti-Zionist, not anti-Zionist in the way of somebody like the Chazon Ish, who we're going to talk about, in the sense that the Chazon Ish does not support the Jewish state, does not approve the Jewish state, but will be in the government, will be involved, will talk to Ben Gurion. The Neturei Karta want nothing to do with the Jewish state. They believe that Jerusalem should be international. They call on Jews to get passports from the United Nations. Okay, the leader of the Neturei Karta in the 50s is this gentleman here, whose name is Amram Bloy. Very, very much a firebrand. You can see him here. He is wearing sackcloth. He is not wearing sackcloth. This is not a Shabbat protest. This is actually a protest against the Adlo Yada on Purim, the Purim carnival, right? Inappropriate to have such a thing in Jerusalem. Okay, so very much a strong, strong conflict in Jerusalem. Eventually, right, even today, we still have issues. Haredi neighborhoods are closed off on Shabbat. There are places that are open, but certainly much less than, let's say, in Tel Aviv or in Haifa. So Shabbat wars still continue. School system. Okay, before the state, there were 4 different streams of education. Okay. And they basically were divided up according to the parties, like everything else, like the health clinics, like the newspapers, like jobs that you got, right? Everything was dependent on what party you belonged to. Two secular systems, the general, the klali, and the labor, more socialist. Okay. Two religious systems, the Mizrahi, right? The religious Zionist, and the Aguda, non-Zionist. After the state, this idea continues. There's a great fight. Who's going to get students? Who's going to get to teach the immigrants? Ben Gurion, Kishitato, right, as he likes to do in many things. He wants one system. I don't want to have all these, I don't want separatists. I want one system, one mamlachti system. Everybody, all four groups say, great, one system is fantastic as long as we are the one system, right? Obviously, that is not going to work. And so the four streams stay and everybody continues to fight. A lot of conflict over who gets to teach the new immigrants. And often, because the Labor Party is so powerful, it's the Labor Party that goes into the Ma'abarot and teaches them. I love this picture because here you have this, presumably Sabra girl, good member of the Mapai, and she's teaching these immigrants from, I'm going to guess, Kurdistan, right? You can see the older girls are all wearing dresses. Everybody's wearing kerchiefs. The younger girls are already wearing shorts, right? They want to make them more Israeli. And what that means is basically becoming non-religious. And there's a lot of battle and bitterness over this, right? Are the Yemenite boys being forced to shave off their peyot? Are they being told to wear shorts? Are they being taken until you live on Shabbat, right? And just to give a little bit of a contrast, you have the kids in Kfar Bloom in the Galil who look extremely like they're having a very good time, but very much a contrast to the Ma'abarot. Okay, I want to do, I think, two more things. We started late, so we'll end a little late. I apologize if anybody has to leave, but I want to do two more related things, and that is to talk about one of the people who most shapes the religious identity of this era. Okay, and that's someone named Rabbi Avram Yishayahu Karlitz, better known as the Chazon Ish. Okay, the Chazon Ish was born in 1878, and he studies with all the greats in Europe. He publishes. He also studies very much a scholar. In 1933, he makes Aliyah. He doesn't have children. He never has children. Um, he chooses when he makes Aliyah in 1933, he does something kind of counterintuitive. He doesn't go to Jerusalem. He says, there's enough rabbis in Jerusalem. I'm going to go to a new place called Bnei Brak. Okay, he comes in 1933. Bnei Brak is 10 years old. And he says, Bnei Brak is a Torah desert. They need me. I'm going to move there. And basically, because he moves there, he attracts Haredi population, he attracts rabbis, he attracts Hasidut, Hasidim. He does not take any official position, but he essentially becomes not only the Rav of Bnei Brak, but basically the posek for all of Haredi Jews. He is very involved in Shemitah issues. He says, don't do the heter machira, don't sell your land, but he establishes the mechanism of what's called Otzar Beit Din, right, which is something that we still use today. He believes that we need to be part of the government. Haredim need to be part of the government because otherwise they won't be able to deal with their needs. He says, it's not that I am a Zionist, but if somebody breaks into my house, I'm going to go and try to get my stuff back from him because that's what I have to do. He has many, many strict halachot. A lot of people know about the shiurim of the Chazon Ish, right? That he has his idea of halachic requirements is greater. Very much hidur mitzvah, the best etrog, the best matzah, right? Things like that. But more than that, he very much established a way of life that became the Haredi way of life, which is choose a life of learning, even if it means that you're not going to have a lot of money. Okay? Build up the yeshivot. He was very instrumental in rebuilding the Torah world. In 1952, he has a famous, because he has heard that he is so influential that all the Haredim will follow what the Chazon Ish says, and he's fascinated by that. He wants to know who is this guy and what is his story, and he goes to him and he says, what are we going to do? How are the religious and the secular going to live together? We have to live here in this country together, even though we have different approaches. And the Chazon Ish gives him this very famous answer. He gives him an answer from the Gemara. Okay? Gemara talks about how if there are two camels walking on a road towards each other, and one camel
Hi.
has a very, very full load, and one camel isn't carrying anything, right? And he says
Good, so I
the
don't need more
empty
IV.
camel has to make way for the full camel. Okay, the Agala
Okay.
Harika has to make
Excuse
way
me,
for the
Lauren,
Agala
turn off.
Hamleah. Okay, thank you. Right of way. And he says, we, Haredi Jews, we are the ones carrying the load. We are the Agala Hamleah. And you, secular Jews, you have the Agala Reka. You have to make way for us for our lifestyle. Now, this has been interpreted in two ways, right? You could say his focus is on the Haredi load. We do all these mitzvot. We need extra consideration. That's kind of the positive way to look at it. The negative way to look at it is you have the Agala Reka. You have the empty load. You, secular Jews, you're not carrying anything, right? And Ben-Gurion says, well, what do you mean we're not carrying anything? We're carrying the state. We're carrying you, right? And this worldview, of course, two very, very, very opposed worldviews. Okay, one final thing. Hey, Bnei Brak, the Haredi city. I just had to bring you this picture because I just loved it. Hey, this is Bnei Brak. And when's this picture from? 2010, I think, right? On Shabbos, that's why it's empty. Otherwise, it would just be all back row, tons and tons of cars. It was always a religious community. It starts out as an agricultural community, then it becomes urban. But when the Chazon Ish moves there, it really becomes Haredi. So Haredi that at a certain point, Rehov Herzl is renamed Rehov Harav Shach. So yes, so that's Bnei Brak. There are other things we could talk about, but I think we have reached the end of our time for today. Let's see some comments, and thank you everybody for your patience that I came late. My grandmother talked about when Golda slept over. That's pretty cool. Had the ultra-religious view that only with the coming of the Mashiach can redemption change relative acceptance. I don't know about relative acceptance. I think it depends on which Haredim you ask. And I think that we need to look out for our population. And when we join coalitions, we're looking out for our population. Not everybody is like this, but it's taken a while. Har Zion has a site that is considered holy to Christians. Yes, definitely. The cenaculum, the room of the Last Supper. But much more, and the Pope goes up there anyway, important for Jews. Um, yeah, Ben-Gurion has a kafia. Yeah, they didn't think of it that way. They thought of it as like an Arab scarf. It was like blending in with the locals. Other comments, other thoughts? Naomi, do you want to tell us your story of Golda sleeping over? No. Okay. Everybody,
So no, in
I will send out a message,
Rochester,
but
New York.
no class next week. What?
No, I grew
Okay,
up in
no class
Rochester, New
next
York, which
week.
is very.
We are having our final class in 2 weeks. Thank you, everybody. What is somebody saying? I can't hear.
No, you asked me about my
Yes, no?
grandmother.
Okay, Shabbat Shalom, everyone. Oh, yes, so tell us.
Oh, so Rochester, New York was a Zioni place. They used to run guns from Rochester to Toronto and when Golda came to raise money, you didn't spend money on a hotel, so she slept over. I don't know if you can hear me or not.
Okay. Did you hang up the pillowcase and frame it or something?
My grandmother just talked about when Golda slept over.
That's pretty cool. All right. So wait,
Yes.
we've had Golda, and who told us the story about being in the Israel Bonds picture? We're getting all this nice
Oh,
connections.
yeah,
All
Uncle
right.
Joe.
Shabbat shalom, everyone.
Shabbat
Shabbat
shalom.
shalom.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Shabbat shalom.
תודה רבה.